Hi everyone, Nothany Sleep Tano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for a review of the Dos Monos record, Dos City. This is the debut full-length album from an experimental hip-hop outfit hailing from Japan. These guys have been building a small buzz for themselves over in Europe and the Far East. They actually starred in a television mini-series that they actually soundtracked as well. And of course it would take a label as weird as DEATHBOMB Arc over here in the States to say, hey, let's release this group's music. That's what we want to do. I must warn my audience, though, many of you, including myself, will be hitting a language barrier when listening to this album. Yes, the group does rap in a mix of Japanese and English, but it is very much mostly Japanese. However, I would argue anyone listening to this record that does not speak Japanese, there is still a very deep appeal for this LP coming out of the instrumentals, the unique sound that the group generates on this thing. They sit pretty firmly in a 90s hip-hop, hardcore hip-hop, jazz rap aesthetic. The likes of DJ Premier and Wu-Tang and Redman and A Tribe Called Quest, as well as The Roots, seem to have a pretty profound influence on the sound of this record. But Dos Monos have taken the sounds of these chunky beats, these jazz samples, these aggressive rap flows, and evolved them into something truly experimental, cacophonous, and weird. Though still, there are a lot of aspects of the group's music that I think could be appreciated from sort of like an old head perspective. The track Theater D, which happens in the first leg of the album, features some pretty great flows from each member, some great group chemistry. But as the track progresses, the beat and the vocals are kind of unexpectedly touched up with all these weird psychedelic embellishments and also these strange metallic hits of percussion kind of popping their way in here and there. It's like being caught up in a very alien but totally exciting whirlwind of sound, or watching a really badass action movie in another language. I may not get some of the subtle plot points that may run throughout the movie, but because of the genre, I'm already somewhat familiar with the form, I know what to expect, and I can still see tons of explosions and ass-kicking happening in every direction. Plus, the lighting and the editing and the cinematography and the color correction are all really good. The madness that you hear on Theater D pretty much continues through the rest of the project. I would say that Dos Monos really only falter when they fail to let a great idea pan all the way out by cutting it short, or going too mild on a track like Agartha, which in a lot of respects feels like very meat and potatoes hardcore hip-hop to me, just in another language. There are also some points here where maybe some of the flows and deliveries come off a bit too over the top, a bit too goofy or cartoonish. Or take the track 20XX, where I don't think the group do enough to put a spin on their very obvious influences, as the flows and the instrumental on this track just very much sound like a straight play out of the RZA playbook. This song really does sound like a Wu-Tang clunker picked up off the cutting room floor and just like turned into an album track. The song Clean Ya Nerves, though, works with pretty much the same reference points but has better flows, a beat that is absolutely pummeling, feels like 12 pianos are being dropped on top of me at once, with a whole horn section as well. Meanwhile, a bunch of reversed rap verses are being thrown at me in every direction. The song BACCHUS is similarly overwhelming, but for different reasons. The beat on this thing sounds like the group are sampling all of this old jazz and incidental music from the golden years of television, and the sound palette, the background keeps switching and changing and shifting like somebody's constantly changing the channels. The song Schizoidian, oddly enough, sounds like what I think schizophrenia would sound like if personified in a hip-hop song, with its doubled and jumbled vocals, its dissonant, relentless, and tangled instrumental. So there are a lot of experimental and exciting and very creative ideas on this record, flying in all directions. However, I do feel like the noisiness, the cacophony of this group, it does over time in the track list kind of become a crutch. They pretty much paint themselves into a corner with it, like on Abdication Before He Dies, where I mean, the group sound just becomes utterly predictable. There really are a handful of tracks on here where, unfortunately, the group doesn't really add much to the track list outside of a vague sense of déjà vu. And again, it's not so much to do with the language barrier here as much as it has to do with the group constantly favoring very similar instrumental builds and flows. So while Dos Manos' sound is very idiosyncratic and very distinct and very specific, it's not incredibly varied at this point anyway. Still, it's a pretty good album though. It is complex, it's charming, it's confusing. It's about 35 minutes long, so it's not really overstaying its welcome. And most likely the experience you have with this album will be unlike the experience you have with any other hip-hop album for the rest of 2019. I can guarantee that. So if you want to hear something that is supremely strange and simultaneously celebrates and mutates the sounds of hardcore hip-hop, 90s hip-hop, then give this thing a listen. I'm feeling a light to decent 7 on this record. Transition, have you given this album a listen? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What would you rate it? You're the best, you're the best. What should I review next? Hit the like if you like. Please subscribe and please don't cry. Hit the bell as well. Over here next to my head is another video for you to check out. Hit that up or the link to subscribe to the channel. Anthony Fantano, music, Dos Manos, Dos City, forever.